Now let's talk with Tony Campolo. Tony, thanks for joining us again today.
My privilege to be with both of you.
Always good to have you on the program. I always appreciate the passion that you bring in your messages, and today I was really struck by the theme of young people especially. I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about what you're experiencing when you speak to these folks in different groups. It seems like young people are very interested in being engaged in the church and in a Christian experience, so to speak, but they're missing something. We've watered it down, and they're looking for more of a faith and action than just an intellectual experience like you talked about. So.
Please don't misunderstand. They see that theological doctrine, biblical truth, is very, very important.
Okay.
But they are strong to affirm that they ought to be doers of the word, not hearers only. Let me give you an example. At Eastern University, where I teach, because I spend most of my time with university students, the Catholic diocese of the city decided to throw out of a cathedral in North Philadelphia 100 homeless people that were living there. The reaction of my students, they got in cars, drove down to North Philadelphia, went into the cathedral so that when the police would come and arrest them in the morning, they would be arrested with the homeless. The interesting thing was at about 3 o'clock in the morning, there was a knock on the door, and they opened the door, and here were 4 firemen who said, when the diocese and the police come to throw you out of here, they're going to do so because this building did not measure up to fire code. And Jonathan said, well, why are you here? Because between now and 8 in the morning when they come, we can bring this building up to fire code.
Wow.
And they did. And they lived among the poor for the rest of the semester, commuting.
These are students.
Yeah, commuting to their classes. Instead of going back to the dormitory, went back to this boarded up cathedral to be among the poor, and it had a transforming effect on their lives. They talk about being born again a second time. You know, evangelicals talk about being born again when they accept Jesus. Born again a second time.
Is it your students that are keeping you so young and
yes.
vibrant? I mean, because one could argue that, you know, you're of mature age. Was that good? Was that delicately said?
Yes, nicely said.
Very nicely said.
Rabbis always say things,
and also their message is very Jewish. I mean, we'll come to that in a second, but one could argue that you could take a different stance. You could say, you know what, I'm at a time in my life where I want to step back. Is it these kids, teaching with them? What is it that drives you to be so passionate?
Well, when you're with young people, you pick up their visions, and I would contend that people are as old as their memories, but as young as their visions. And I find that they continually create new visions of what the world could be. They have a hope about the future that I think a lot of older people don't have. When I talk to older people, they shake their head, well, this country's had it, the world's going down the tubes, it's getting worse and worse.
There's that negative spin.
Oh, I'm going to go out and eat worms. These kids, and I'm not talking about the entire youth generation. I am saying there is emerging out of the youth generation this very select group of people, and they're in the Jewish community, they're in the Muslim community, they're in the Christian community, and they're saying enough of religion that was full of hatred, enough of religion that in fact was judgmental and hypocritical. We want to be genuine followers, in my tradition, of Jesus Christ. We want to be like him.
Well, and they want to feel the presence of God. So much of what I hear from students is, I want to do this because I want to feel my Creator. I don't want to just speak to someone of which I don't hear back. I want to feel God's presence in my life. And by doing this, by working, by getting my hands really dirty.
For a rabbi, you sound like Billy Graham. You know, I mean, I want to feel Christ in my life as mine.
Well,
as
Christ
his
I wouldn't throw in there. But the idea that I feel a presence of God in me.
That's right.
I think that's what we're all searching for.
Well, and it's interesting because you seem to hold up, Tony, that spiritual but not religious is not necessarily a bad thing. And I think that term has been thrown around a lot in conversation right now, especially with young people who are attracted to the mystical sense, like you said, but there's maybe a denominational pullback or what have you. So I'd love to hear both of you kind of address that.
Well, let me start by saying the Pew Foundation has done research that points out what I'm talking about, that young people are more spiritual than they are religious. They are not against religion. They are not for pulling out of religious institutions. But what they are hoping for is that the religious institutions will make them into spiritual beings. They want the religious institutions to lead them into what you were just talking about, this experiential dimension of faith They want to feel God. You said it so well. They want to feel God in their lives. And they come to church and they hear things that don't really do that for them. And so they're very often turned off to the traditional churches. They're starting their own churches, house churches, the emergent church movement. It's all over the place where they're still into getting together, worshiping, praying, meditating, but they're not sure that the old line denominational churches and these new mega churches are really offering them what they're hungry for.
It's interesting because religion or religious has become a bad word,
Yeah.
right? In this group, it's like, it's okay to be spiritual, but it's not okay to be religious because they've decided to let this group own religiosity. The
Yes.
question would be, how do you think they're going to balance bringing their religious aspects that they really love into this spiritual, experiential,
It's up to people like you. It's whether or not the rabbis, the mosque imam, the ministers, the priests are able to transform institutional religion into forms that will in fact meet this hunger of the soul. I mean, there's a lot of hunger for spirituality out there. And a lot of churches and a lot of synagogues and a lot of mosques are catching on and are beginning to modify their message and their activities to meet this need. If they don't, they will die.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how do you think the interfaith landscape that we're living in now, Tony, it's changed over the years, obviously. We're interacting with people of different faiths, especially young people more than ever on colleges. How is that impacting this whole sense of desire for more spirituality?
Well, let's take the evangelical tradition because we tend to be the most dogmatic.
Okay.
That's a nice way of saying it.
Yeah, I thought that was a pretty good way of saying it.
So when people ask me about, do you believe that Jesus is the only way to salvation? My answer is very simple. He's the only way I know. I grew up in this tradition. I came to know God through Jesus Christ. It's the only way I know. You say, well, won't you make pronouncements and judgments about other religions? That is not my business. I need to, in fact, deal with my own faith, those who are evangelicals, and begin to ask, have you really experienced God? And the more they are alive in God, the more they will relate lovingly to people of other traditions in our pluralistic society.
It's really your leadership and your passion that's really, I think, going to do that to help us all see the spark of God in each of us.
Yes, but you have to understand, it's not me, it's you. You're the younger generation. I'm the old guy. I go to weddings and the bride's grandmother looks better than the bride. I mean, come on. It's your job. You're the next generation. You're to lead them.
Thanks for inspiring us, Tony, as always.